1973, Cooksville, an unincorporated community in Howard County, Maryland, played host to a bizarre encounter, one involving weird objects and strange insect-like beings. Due to the sheer number of alien contact cases reported in 1973, it has become known as the Year of the Humanoids. The Cooksville incident is one of the lesser-known cases from that year, but it is still quite extraordinary. It was around 7 p.m. Mike Shea was driving towards Olney, Maryland, to meet up with a friend. A half hour outside of Baltimore, while passing through Cooksville, Shea noticed a beam of light strike a barn about 150 feet from his car. He was a little surprised and elected to slow his car down. He followed the light back to the source, expecting to see a helicopter. Instead, he observed a huge object with a ring of alternating red and yellow lights hovering near the barn. Adding to this, it was totally silent, so he was quite certain that this was no helicopter. When the beam of light shut off, Shea suddenly became quite fearful. It was at that moment that he felt something moving up behind him. Peering out his window, he could see that the object had moved away from the barn and was now directly over his car. He next felt what he described as a tingling electric current running down his spine. As the sense of fear and desperation began to set in, he suddenly and inexplicably found himself feeling quite relaxed and was now approaching his destination. He was stunned, unsure of what had just transpired. When he checked his watch, he was surprised to discover that it was almost 9 o'clock. He had lost 2 hours of time. Many years later, Mike Shea, in an effort to uncover what happened in that space of time on the road, he elected to undergo hypnotic regression. As revealed in Patrick Huey's The Field Guide to Extraterrestrials, Shea's regression uncovered many of the details of that night, including just what happened in that space of missing time. During the session, Shea remembered seeing the light hitting the barn and of seeing the object. He then saw 4 figures standing on the side of the road. He then realized the figures were not people, but strange creatures dressed in a black kind of armor that, to him, looked almost like plastic. They had black faces and appeared to be wearing helmets with a line down the middle that came to a point. The strangest thing of all, the beings looked like huge grasshoppers with long arms and bowed legs. 3 of the creatures were very large. The 4th one was small and wore a black silky suit with a zipper up the front. Shea recalled thinking that this smaller being was, quote, ancient. He then saw a large shiny craft hovering nearby, emitting a low whirring sound. There was a second smaller craft sitting on the ground in the field beside the road. He recalled that his car was stopped and that these beings escorted him out of his vehicle and inside one of the objects. From there he was placed on a table and examined. He remembered that various organic samples were collected from his body. When they finished what they were doing, they returned him to his vehicle where he continued driving in an almost zombie-like state. It was not until he was approaching his destination that he became aware of his surroundings. May 2004, a New Mexico woman named Daniel B. had decided to go for a hike through Aztec's Heart Canyon, where she encountered something more fitting of a 50s-era sci-fi movie, except this was real. Daniel recalled that it was warm and sunny that day. After finding a spot to sit in the canyon, she pulled out a book and grabbed some snacks and set about relaxing. It was her day off work and she was in no rush to get back. About 2 hours later, Daniel's attention was pulled away from her book when she caught sight of something in the skyline. A large black object. A helicopter. As she stared at it, she suddenly became aware of the fact that the thud, thud, thud sound that usually accompanied helicopters wasn't there. Adding to the mystery, the strange helicopter appeared to be carrying a small calf, held tightly in place by black ropes. She quickly determined that what she was seeing was somewhat unusual. As the helicopter moved closer to the canyon and her position, she was suddenly struck by the realization that this wasn't a helicopter at all. It was a large, 13-foot-long insect. the presumed rotor blades of the helicopter were actually the fast-beating wings of the creature. What she assumed were ropes were actually powerful-looking black limbs. Daniel watched in a mixture of shock and horror as the monstrous insect flew over her head. It dropped the calf off on a nearby peak. It then swooped to the ground with a tremendous speed, pounced on the animal, and then tore into it. Daniel stayed in her spot, too afraid to move. Less than a half hour later, the giant insect finished with its meal and then took to the skies. After a while, Daniel also retreated, being sure to keep her eyes to the sky in case the monster mosquito returned. Fearing that the police would assume she was crazy, she elected to not fill out a report and remained silent about the incident until 2007, when she reached out to paranormal researcher and author Nick Redfern. Not surprisingly, Nick had a hard time believing her story, but he thought she was sincere, and he does believe that she indeed saw something strange in Hart Canyon in 2004.